I do want to end the show here with an NFL thought. Because over the last few days, the NFL and the NFLPA, remember on Thursday or Monday show, was talking about how the NFL really has to get a lot of things figured out before season can get started. We didn't. By the time Monday's show finished, we didn't know the number of preseason games that are going to get played, what the testing protocol was going to be, what other precautions were going to be for players, having to keep them safe, what training camp is going to look like with a ramp-up period. And this is when rookies for the Chiefs and Texans reported on Monday. We didn't know those answers. Now on Thursday, we have more clarity. Testing is going to be every day until until the positive rate in the NFL is below 5%. Then they'll go every other day. And also we know that the NFL will have 0 preseason games this year. 0. And while a lot of players were happy that preseason was canceled, a lot of fans that pay for season tickets that include preseason games that they have to buy, I'm sure are happy. They don't have to worry about that. But to me, canceling the NFL preseason does more harm than good canceling. Holy cow, it's been a tough day talking. Good thing I have to really talk for a few hours. Canceling the NFL preseason does more harm than good this year. I'll explain why. Number one, I think the biggest issue and the biggest area that we didn't really think it affects, but it really does now, is officiating. Because now a report came out that NFL officials and referees will not have any on-field training, will not work together until week 1 of the regular season. The first time they're getting together on a field as a crew is going to be the games actually matter in week 1 of the regular season. So no preseason games to work for the NFL officials to get back into shape. No visits to training camp, which they usually do. Those are canceled as well. So to me, that's not a good thing. When you have referees trying to get the kinks out, trying to get used to each other, trying to really get on the same page, and they're doing so when games actually count. Now, as we know, referees have been under the microscope more and more every year. High-definition TVs, slow-mo replays, better camera angles have really dissected every single call referees have made. And for the most part, unfortunately for them, some calls are missed. They're exposed on TV, and we all as fans freak out. A lot of outrage on social media. How can you miss that call? How can you make that call? No one's there. The referee lost the game. The pressure to be an NFL referee has never been higher than it is right now. And now, that's only going to increase because guess what? You're going to put these guys on the field, put them with the same criticism, but they don't have any training. Could you imagine if the NFL decided to cancel training camp and just said, you know what, we're going to see you week 1? What a disaster that would be. Imagine there's no training camp and the first time teams could come together, the first time Patrick Mahomes could throw to his receivers, the first time Deshaun Watson's throwing to his receivers, the first time Joe Burrow is meeting his Bengals teammates or Cam Newton's meeting his Patriots teammates. It was week 1 on the field. Imagine how ugly that would be. Imagine how many mistakes there would be. Imagine just how bad of a product that would be on the field. You're doing that with referees. I understand their training is different physically. You know, you could still train on your own. But the NFL is a game that it moves quick. These players get faster, bigger, and stronger. So things happen in the blink of an eye, faster than they ever have. So to not have your eyes basically trained, to have the speed of the game, to know what you're looking for, to practice any new rules they're going to put in, I think it's going to hurt the first few games of the regular season. Not to mention, let's look at it from the pandemic point of view, right? With this year, obviously, in a big question mark, players are going to get sick, coaches are going to get sick. Well, referees can also get sick. And the NFL didn't hire any extra referees this year. So the number that they have, that's it. So guess what? If an official gets sick the night before the game, the week before the game, he's not replaced. There's no one to replace him with. So what happens is the referee crews shrink. Well, guess what? Now, all of a sudden, referees are going to be different spots on the field. They have to look out for more. Their responsibilities increase. There's no way to practice the increase in responsibilities. There's no way to practice maybe positioning yourself differently, see what works, what doesn't work. So now you're going to have less referees on the field, covering more ground, looking for more infractions, and then basically going to have to adjust on the fly, learn on the fly. That sounds like it's going to be a recipe for disaster. That sounds like we're going to have a lot of complaints on social media the first few weeks of the season. And it's going to be, I think, a big, big point of emphasis that could possibly take away from the game, could possibly be the major storyline is refereeing. Because as we know, we love complaining about officials. We love complaining about referees. So to have them basically get no practice, no training until week 1 of the season, to me, is scary. That's one harm, I think, of canceling the preseason. Another harm, speaking of coronavirus, speaking of the pandemic, you don't allow now travel protocols, stadium protocols to be practiced. Right now, teams aren't going to travel to games. Teams are going to travel to other cities until it actually matters. So if you had 2 preseason games, one home and one away, you could practice putting travel implications, putting travel protocols in place for the preseason and see what happens. We'll sit every other seat. We'll go to the hotel. Guys will not share a room. You can tinker with different things to keep players safe. You get no way to practice that until week 1 of the regular season, and it actually counts. And guess what? If there's a gap in your quote-unquote bubble, if there's a hole in your plan where somehow the virus could either enter the team or a player, there's no rules or not enough strict rules, and the player goes out, catches the virus, brings it back, guess what? They're not missing preseason games or missing training camp. You're missing real games now. It gets real. So there's no way to button up and practice travel protocols when you're going to away games or have stadium precautions or stadium protocols set. By the time the regular season starts, you know what works and what doesn't work. The NFL is still playing to have fans. Think about that. On July 23rd, the NFL still plans having fans in the stands. Now, different teams have different rules and regulations. Like the Jets and Giants won't have fans, but the Ravens said they'll operate at a lower capacity. The Dolphins have put out a plan for operating at a lower capacity. Teams are going to have fans, or some teams in states that allow fans to attend games, they'll have fans. Or it's 20% capacity, 30% capacity, 15%, whatever it is. You're going to have fans in the stands. Well, and to do so, wouldn't you think you want a preseason game or two, maybe to practice some protocols, see what works, see what doesn't work? That was an opportunity, at least, to see, okay, you know what? Maybe we're over secure on security. We can let a little more people in. Maybe we have to tighten it up a little bit more. There's different ways and areas you can gauge what you're doing and test what protocols you want to put in place. And the preseason in games where, okay, you know what? If fans are 10 minutes late to the game, fine. That's not a big deal. It's preseason. Who cares? Now, really, there's no margin for error. Traveling has to be buttoned up and has to be perfect from day one. Stadium protocols have to be perfect and buttoned up from day one. The margin for error has shrunk, and basically it's zero. And finally, just looking at this from a pure football perspective, pure on the field, X's and O's football perspective, the quality of play for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of the season is going to suffer. A great example is last year. Chicago Bears 2019, they rested basically every single starter for the preseason. Mitchell Trubisky, Khalil Mack, any prominent starter on the Bears didn't play at all in the preseason last year. Once now. Missed all 4 games. Matt Nagy a few months ago, basically said he regrets that decision. He thinks the slow start the Bears got off to could be accredited straight to not playing in preseason, not kind of ironing out some of the kinks, and not having his guys ready to play from the jump. So now, we have every team essentially missing every single playoffs, missing every preseason game, every starter not getting any sort of reps. Not to mention, you think part of the reason for training camp, and maybe if you don't play in the preseason, what you do is you have a joint practice against another team. So if the Giants, let's say, are playing preseason game against the Jets on Thursday, well, Monday and Tuesday, the Jets and the Giants would scrimmage against each other. You have practices where you have your first team offense going against first team defense. So sure, if you don't want to put your starters in the preseason game itself, well, you have scrimmages in practice that kind of mimic the intensity of a regular season game, and you get to hit someone that's not your own team. Well, that's not going to happen this year. No preseason games, which means you're not going to have any joint practices, which again means that you're going to have some ugly football the first month of the year, and injuries could honestly increase. Think about it. Part of the preseason and part of training camp is used to get players' bodies back in shape. Now, I understand now everyone has personal trainers, everyone has access to a gym or a field, and you're always training. It's basically 24/7. There's no offseason. Well, obviously, the pandemic put a halt on that. Some players didn't have access to the proper equipment or the proper training that they normally do have it in a regular offseason. So guess what? Maybe they come a little bit out of shape. Maybe they come less stronger than they hope to be. You got to work your way back into getting into shape, work your way back into playing shape. Part of that is hitting in practice, hitting in the preseason. Well, that's not going to happen. So no scrimmages or joint practices or preseason games is going to make it harder to replicate the intensity that comes with the game. And for a lot of these teams, a lot of these big-time players, the first time they will go in an environment that is intense, that is game-like, will be week 1. So the quality play is going to suffer. I really do think so. So quality play is going to hurt. As you heard, Matt Nagy just straight out, accredited a slow start because his players and his starters didn't play in the preseason at all last year. That's going to be the same for every team. So play is going to be sloppy. You can't really test any stadium or travel protocols until it actually matters. And if there's a hole, your team's going to suffer. Players are going to get sick, and they're going to miss real games that count, not training camp or preseason games. You're going to miss real games. And my biggest concern, honestly, is the NFL officials. There's no training camp now for them. They don't have any preseason games to work. They're not going to training camps this year to prevent travel. The first time they will work together is week 1 of the regular season. As we know, officials have been criticized. Officials have been really focused upon these last few years. As the TV angles get better, as HD gets better, as we see in slow-mo replay what happens and what not. We are really armchair referees. The armchair quarterback has turned into the armchair referee. I think it's going to make their jobs that much harder this year when you can't get any training, when you can't train your eyes to the speed of the game, and you're just going to be basically getting back in shape, working your way back to midseason form in games that actually count. So to me, I look at all these factors as the NFL canceled the preseason. Does a lot more harm than good. I think the game's going to suffer in a few different ways. And I think that, while players are happy, sure, no preseason games, no meaningless games, no reason to get healthy, less wear and tear on our body, I think in the end it's going to be a big detriment and it's going to hurt the game more than it's going to help.